Hello, Zubair.
Hello, how are you?
Thank you. Thank you very much for coming to talk to me. I really appreciate it.
And thank you so much for reaching out and inviting me. I'm incredibly flattered and I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
Thank you so much. So, please tell us a little bit about yourself. Where were you born, and what was your childhood like?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I was born in Huntington, New York, which is a town in Long Island. And my childhood, very classic American, I would say. I was born and raised in suburbia. And,
Mhm.
some of the memories when I think about the word childhood are like going to the beach, like Robert Moses, or running after the ice cream truck, or hanging out with my friends and just, walking down Main Street. So it was awesome. I grew up playing soccer,
Mhm.
basketball, all the sports. Tennis was a huge one. And it was just, me, my mother, my father, and my two younger sisters. And so we come from a city in India called Hyderabad.
Mhm.
And so my dad was born and raised in Hyderabad, and
Mhm.
my mom was a first generation American born to Hyderabadi immigrants who migrated in the 70s.
Okay, so she was born in America.
Yep.
All right, very nice. So, I also have seen in your Instagram stories that you love to ride horses, like you horseback riding.
Yes.
Yeah. So is that also you grew up like playing tennis and also other things, but this was also a big part of your life, right?
Yes, so horseback riding is really interesting. So I did not do that in Long Island. I think I had maybe
Mhm.
one or two lessons, and that was because my family had received like
Mhm.
coupon from like the townwide fund, I think is what it's called.
Mhm.
But it wasn't until college that I had met someone who was on the riding team, and I
Mhm.
was really, I've always loved animals. That's been a huge part of my life.
Right.
And so I remember I was in their room freshman year of college, and
Mhm.
I looked at her pants on the drying rack and I was like, those are weird pants. Like, what are those? I learned that those were riding breeches and that my school, I went to
Right.
Lafayette College,
Mhm.
had a riding team.
Right.
So I was like, that's like always been one of my biggest dreams. I would love to go horseback riding.
Right.
So I actually just walked on the team
Mhm.
and I learned how to ride within, I'd say, 2, 3 months. And
Mhm.
I started September not knowing anything. And by
Mhm.
November, I was already showing and competing, and I actually
Mhm.
placed 6 out of 10. So
Wow.
it was a really gratifying moment, and I'm so
Mhm.
grateful. Horseback riding is my favorite activity that I do. It's something that I really hold close to my heart, and
Wow. Wow. It's
I
amazing.
discovered it in college. Yeah,
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that.
of course.
Um, and you mentioned that you went to Lafayette College, right? You
Yes,
graduated recently, and you're mostly interested in religion and politics. Is that right?
yes, yep.
And you are carrying on any kind of research along those subjects right now?
Not right now at the
Okay.
moment, but I did an honors thesis
Hmm.
this past year. So my honors thesis was titled Zawale Hyderabad, The
Hmm.
Downfall of Hyderabad, Muslim Women's Experiences on the Annexation and
Hmm.
Assimilation of Hyderabad State into the Indian Union.
Hmm.
So for those who aren't familiar, there were a lot of princely states that were in the British Raj or British India, Hyderabad being one of them. And
Hmm.
so in 1948, India annexed the princely state of Hyderabad. And so, what my project really looked at was, the effects of that military invasion on the
Hmm.
Muslim community, specifically Muslim women.
Hmm.
And so, I conducted a series of oral interviews with survivors of the annexation, primarily women, but if they weren't women,
Hmm.
stories that focused on women in their lives or the women at the time. And I also looked at, Indian secularism and kind of the theory behind that and what
Hmm.
Indian secularism was at that time with the Congress Party and how that differed from what I called a mushtaraka culture, a shared
Hmm.
culture
Hmm.
within Hyderabad state and how those two kind of differed.
Hmm.
And so it was fascinating. And I also looked at the concept of parda or,
Hmm.
separation between men and women. And
Hmm.
so at this time, a lot of women were within the parda system. They lived in separate quarters, which we called zananas. They wore burqas or, large public coverings in the public. And they also weren't allowed to, walk unaccompanied by men. And traditionally, that sort of system has been used by a lot of historians to portray Hyderabad as an oppressive Muslim society, when
Hmm.
in reality, what I discovered with my interviews was that Barda was a sense of safety for Muslim women, and that
Hmm.
within this shared culture, modesty was a
Mhm.
emphasized value, and that when the Indian state took over and implemented Indian secularism, one of
Mhm.
the ways that Indian secularism attached itself was by disrupting Muslim women's senses of modesty and safety. And so I also looked at the contemporary forms of that, with India's hijab ban, with the
Mhm.
triple talaq ban, and also,
Right.
an analysis of different films and literature. There was a recent Telugu film that was released in Hyderabad called Razakar.
Mhm.
So that was all about the Indian annexation, and it was very much a biased perspective on the history, because it was told from a very Hindu nationalist, Indian nationalist perspective.
Right.
When the research kind of poses questions and probes at some of the state narratives that we see around this event.
Yes, that's fascinating. My wife also does research on Indian Muslim women's in North India, and her research is focused on. She's an anthropologist, and she studies the stigma attached to being infertile. That's the
Mm.
social stigma,
Oh,
especially in the mostly women, but especially mostly Muslim women in northern India. So she did a lot of research in and around Lucknow, and she also went to AIIS in Lucknow, where you went.
oh
And
wow.
Sanat Kadai, we hang out we a lot when we go there. Madhavi Kukureja and all those people,
Mhm.
wonderful people. So yeah, similar topics as you and my wife's. Similar
Oh,
kind
that's
of
great.
idea.
That's
Yeah,
awesome.
yeah. So I'm born and raised in Lucknow, born and bred, and I came to America 20 years ago. So Lucknow is my hometown. Every time you shared something from Lucknow, like I want to see more.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
so
that
good.
was just the best time of my life. I if I could go back, I would 1000%. Like,
How long were you there for? For 3 months or for a whole year?
oh no, it was, I think, 2.5 months.
Two and a
We
half
or
months.
just over 2 months. We had come
Mhm.
June 10th of 2022, and we left August 5th. Um,
Oh, okay.
so, or no, sorry, August 10th. So yeah, just
August,
about 2 months. Yeah,
June 10th. Okay, right.
yeah, yeah,
Okay,
yeah. So we just passed the 2 year
right.
anniversary of that. But oh yeah,
Very nice.
I loved Lucknow. I don't know. I think this is a very touristy thing of me, that I spent a lot of time in Hazrat Ganj. Just
I love my Hasganj is my old stomping grounds.
there was I forget the name of it, but there was a bookstore in Hazrat Ganj,
So
and
Ramadvani's, I think that's closed, but there's another one called the Universal Bookstore.
a
That's
Universal, yes,
Universal,
Universal
right, right,
bookstores.
yeah, yeah,
Oh my God, I was there basically every week, just
yeah.
buying books and reading. And then
Right, right.
there was the tailor's outfit that I would go to a lot, because they,
Also in Hasganj.
yes, also in Hazrat Ganj, right
Yeah,
across the
right.
street. I forget the name, but there was like a gate,
It's
and the reason,
called it's a Janpath.
yes,
Janpath. It's like you go walk up to the platform, and there's like a bunch of tailors.
and then yeah, you go down
Yeah,
under.
under
And
the
so there
basement.
was because I'm very interested in like Mughal fashion, and
Right, right.
I'd always seen like these peshwazes and these awesome outfits. And so when I was there, I kind of wanted to recreate that. And so there was
Hmm.
a lot of the tailors actually were like, no, we can't make that for you. But there was one in Dunpat that I used, and
Hmm.
oh my God, I think I went to him like four
You
or
have
five
to go.
times in
You
my
have to go
trip.
back and
I
visit them
must. I
again.
really, I loved it so much.
Right, right. I was gonna say, yeah. So 2 years ago, you spent 2.5 months, right?
Yep.
And you, yes, remember what I was gonna ask you. Sounds like you can speak pretty fluent Urdu.
तुम थोड़ा
Oh,
अभी मैं
okay.
कुछ भूल गया.
Okay, okay.
Yeah,
Because
yeah. I did the critical language scholarship,
right, right.
which is a U.S. Department of State slash Department of Cultural Affairs and Education program that
Mhm,
sends American students, across the world to learn what they call critical languages. So they have
mhm,
about 14 or 15 language offerings, if I'm remembering correctly.
mhm,
And I applied for the Urdu program because, as I said, my family is Muslim. We're from Hyderabad.
mhm,
So, Urdu is a very big part of our cultural identity. But, growing up as a kid, my dad tried to teach me Urdu, but it just didn't stick. So I
right, right.
didn't really know Urdu for
Mhm,
most of my life. And it wasn't until middle school when I started to like really come into my own cultural identity and
mhm,
explore what it meant that I
mhm,
started to want to learn the language. And
mhm,
sophomore year of college was when I really kind of decided that,
mhm,
pursuing something in either academia or, federal jobs or something with consultancy, any of those fields, I wanted to work with South Asia. And I knew that having a language skill would be incredibly necessary. So I felt like I wanted to learn Urdu first just because of my familial ties. So I applied and I got in, and it was, that 2 months I was in AIIS in
Mhm.
Lucknow. We just basically, it was like a huge language immersion program. I remember the
Mhm.
first day, they immediately started us with the alphabet, and that was the most confused I have
Right,
ever
right.
been because it was so English. And, I had like some understandings of basic Hindi and Urdu, but
Mhm.
going from like the English alphabet to then the Urdu alphabet is an entirely different thing.
Right.
Did you ever study Urdu, Deepak?
I actually thank you for asking this because I grew up in Lucknow,
Yep.
and I'm like I've never lived anywhere else in India except Lucknow. But
Yep.
I can speak Urdu. When I speak, it's Urdu, but we call
Yep.
it Hindi, but it's Urdu. When I talk to my Pakistani friends from Lahore, they say they're speaking Urdu and I'm speaking Hindi, but it's the same thing. But I only recently, like 2 years ago, I paid an online course and I learned Urdu. Now I can read and write Urdu, basic, but I can do it
Yeah.
now. Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, and I don't know if you felt this way, but
yeah,
what was so hard for me about learning that alphabet was not only were there the standard letters like Aleph, Be, but like they had like the initial, the median, and then the finishing stage, and learning those shapes and how they connected.
that
That
can become confusing.
It was so confusing.
Right.
And I just remember like the first 2 weeks of me studying Urdu now,
Yeah. Right.
that was the most confusing part, was, learning which stage and how to connect. But then
Right.
after, when there was a moment where it just like clicked. And then after that, we learned the entire alphabet. It was so much easier, but
Yeah.
it was a challenge, but one that was very worthy.
Right. Right. Thank you. So talking about, like you said, you mentioned that your family is Muslim, right?
Yep.
And you also are interested in religion as a scholar.
Yep.
So how do you grew up in America mostly, so and you said you started to come into your own culture. Now, do you see yourself as an American kid, or you are like also American but also South Asian who speaks Urdu and is doing research about Hyderabad, and you're also Indian. So how do you balance the two identities, or do you have two identities at all?
So I think it really depends on the context where I'm in.
Right.
I would only say I really identify as American
Hmm.
when I'm abroad. Like
Okay.
I studied abroad in London. I did an internship there last summer.
Mhm.
And when I was in India, I also did that. So when I was there,
Mhm.
the way I speak, my mannerisms are obviously different than the people who were there. And
Right.
so and I would identify as American because that was where, kind of all of the externally, behavior was coming from. But when I'm here, which is most of my life,
Mhm.
I have a tough time saying that I am American because I think I have such an idea of the term American being associated with whiteness and
Right. Right.
European. I grew up in a very Italian, Jewish, Irish
Right.
town, and so America was
In other words, very white town.
a very white town, exactly,
Right.
and a lot of like patriotic America was Memorial Day, our
Mhm.
veterans, our soldiers, our history of like,
Right.
people coming to Ellis Island or, being in the Civil War.
Hmm.
And in truth, I never could relate to that because I'm like, my family came over here in the 70s.
Right.
We've never been a part of the major historical backgrounds.
Right.
Whereas in India, in Hyderabad, we have always been a part of every one of those major history things. Like
Right.
that's something I just feel more connected to. So I would
Hmm.
really say I identify as like Hyderabadi American, or
Hmm.
Hyderabadi. And the
Hmm.
reason I say this is because as I've gone through my cultural journey, I don't know if you've heard this with other diaspora kids, but Bollywood was kind of what drew me in.
Wow.
To be
Right. Yeah.
honest, my parents actually met at a Bollywood film in Hyderabad, and so like
Oh,
Bollywood
wow.
was very much the nexus of who I am. And so in middle school,
Hmm.
when I was grappling with the question, "Who am I? What does it mean to be Indian?"
Hmm.
Bollywood was kind of my answer. And for a while in high school and middle school, that was kind of my uniting factor with other Indian American kids that I would meet
Hmm.
along the way.
Hmm.
And I got very close with them. We would talk about Bollywood, talk
Hmm.
about the different stars. Fun fact: I actually had a fan page for Rani Mukherjee,
Oh,
and
wow.
I,
And
I,
you
mean, I
you
love Rani.
you ran that, right?
I'm sorry.
Did you run that page?
I did, and
Wow.
it actually was the at one point the largest Rani Mukherjee fan page on Instagram. I think
Oh, wow.
I have over 200,000 followers still.
My goodness.
Yes, and so that was a huge part of my identity. And so that's how I bonded with people. But the more I got into college, and I would say during COVID, especially when I started digging into my own family history,
Hmm.
and looking at Hyderabad and learning about the annexation,
Hmm.
I kind of realized that there are a lot of, and I'm sure you feel this way too, but in India, there are so many different regions and ethnicities and traditions that the term Indian, it almost feels too broad. And I don't really identify, like when, if I see other Indian people, the first thing I think of them is like, oh, like they're Gujarati, they're Rajasthani, they're Telugu, they're Tamil, but like that's their own specific subculture. And I think I really identify with the Hyderabadi subset. So again, it really just depends on if I'm, with other Indian people or without, because then if they're not Indian, I'll usually say, oh, I'm Indian, I'm from a city from Hyderabad, have to immediately come off the gate with talking about the annexation.
Right. Well, that's very interesting because it's right. I mean, if you say I'm Indian American, then you only know mostly about Hyderabad, right?
Yes.
Because of your parents and your research. But if you say like I also know about Tamil Nadu or Punjab, that would be incorrect, like not totally correct.
Exactly.
So also when people ask me, oh, is this how you guys do this in India? But I don't. That it would be wrong if I said yes, because I only know Lucknow.
Exactly.
Exactly.
And it's also, I've also, I don't know, I think this might be where it's a little different, but like, as an Indian Muslim, right? There were so many stereotypes that I think as a kid, I just remember hearing. There was one in, I think, middle school where we were at a farm and someone like looked at a cow and was like, oh, like, don't you guys think that's sacred? And I was like, and there are so many things wrong with that. One, like
I love Five Guys burgers.
But I'm like, you can't speak for every Indian person, and that's also traditionally a Hindu thing, and we're not Hindu, we're Muslim, and they were like, oh, Muslims exist in India, and I'm like,
oh wow,
oh my god, like yes we do.
Yeah, lots of stereotypes, right?
Yeah.
So did you like all the things that you learned about India and Hyderabad through your parents? When you came to Lucknow, was that your first time in India?
No, so I had been to India. Let's see, that's 2022. So I had been to India around 5 or 6 times beforehand. My parents made it an effort to go to Hyderabad to see my dad's family and also see members of my mom's family. So I actually got to see my mom's grandma, my great grandmother, multiple times. So I had grown up going to Hyderabad with my family, but Lucknow was the first time that I had actually explored India on my own. And that was, a completely different experience and an experience that I really, really loved.
Was it? I have a 14-year-old kid, and one day I'm hoping to send her off to India for the first time alone. So do you think was it hard for you initially? It's like, oh, I would rather have my mother or father here with me, or I'm having a hard time. I don't understand these people, even though I'm one of them, right? And I need to go back. But then slowly, like after 2-3 weeks, like, it's okay. How did it go?
I think I was very excited because I always knew I wanted to study abroad in India, and I always knew that I wanted to start establishing my own connections in India. So I think it really depends on the person. Yes, there were times where I wished my mom or my dad, I wish they were there. I could be like, oh my God, like, this is so cool. Like, I wish they were experiencing. And, so many family stories and so many people because we're a huge storytelling family. And so India, Hyderabad has always been this place that's like, it's our place, it's our home. Everyone's from there. And I think the people that I miss the most are my grandparents. And so, I specifically mean my nana and my nani, my maternal grandparents. So unfortunately, my nani had died in 2020, but she and I were very, very close.
Sorry. Was she with you guys in America?
Yes. So my mom's parents were with us in America. My dad's parents were in Hyderabad, and I love my dad's parents dearly, but I think for a while I didn't know Urdu, and it was so hard to see them. So there was definitely a little bit of a distance between us compared to my mom's parents. But I was so close to my nani, and all the stories that she told me about her childhood and her growing up in Hyderabad, and my nana's stories of growing up in Hyderabad. I think when I was in India, I thought of them the most because I had actually never been to India with them. They had been to India while I was in America, or we'd been to India while they were in America. And so my nani's mom, my great grandmother, it was weird because I remember meeting her and being there, and it would be me and my great grandmother and my family, and there'd be pictures of my grandma or pictures of us. But I'd always be like, this is so weird. Like, my nani should be here. But yeah, when I was in Lucknow, that first adjustment, I was like, I just wish,
Mhm.
my nanny was still alive to see this,
I'm
because
sorry.
she would have, I would have loved to talk to her about this and get her opinion. And it
Right.
was nice having my nana, because I would talk to him and tell him about what was going on and practice Urdu with him.
Right.
Yeah, it was. I would say it was still definitely an adjustment, because I think
Mhm.
part of what was difficult, was that there was the Indian people in our program who were studying abroad, and then there was
Mhm.
the white people. And
Okay.
so,
So Indian people were actually Indian, or they were like
no, they were
all?
diaspora like me.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, sorry, diaspora like me, or
Okay.
white people. And I think that was like a little bit of a friction. I think between us, there was, they were treated differently. Like they'd be swarmed in the streets, and having taking pictures and
Like white people, right? White people.
sorry, white people, yeah.
White people. Okay.
And
What about Indians? Indians were like they blended in and they were
we
not
blended
harassed.
in, and I think there was actually some resentment, because one of them had said, you guys just trapeze around and it's so easy while we
Mm.
guys are suffering. And I think my friend was like, well, you have to understand, this is the first time we're in a majority setting where we
Right.
blend
Right.
with people like us. And, this is exciting for us to come back to
Right.
this place that, maybe not, we're not from Lucknow per se, but larger India. Like
Yeah.
this is a huge moment for us.
This is the first time we can blend in and everybody looks like us.
Exactly. And also, like, we can use our language skills, all
Right.
these stories about bartering and, going shopping or eating these
Right.
foods, like we're participating in that.
Right.
And I think that was just something that was, when she said that, I was like, yes, like I completely agree.
Yeah. But maybe, yeah, I mean, yeah, you're right. But they could be, they're like, I want to have the same experience as you are, but I can't because I'm
Yeah.
white.
No, I definitely, and I felt bad for them. But I think when
Yeah.
that was, I think the lowest point in adjusting to India was when
Right.
all that tension was brewing.
Right.
And it was like, okay, like, what do you want us to do? Kind of
Well, I
thing.
have the same. I can understand their side of the story and people who look like you, Indians or
Yeah.
Pakistanis. Because I'm Indian from Lucknow and my wife is white from Pennsylvania. So when we go to Lucknow, this happens. I'm walking, nobody bothers me. She's walking behind me. People always trying to sell her things, like
Yeah.
touching. Like that happens because it's slightly less because I am with her. You know,
Yeah.
people leave her alone, but if she's alone, that can happen. So I understand. You're right.
Yeah. Yeah.
But at least you guys had great time in
Oh
Lucknow,
my
right?
God, it was the most fantastic time, because not only did we learn Urdu, there were so many cultural activities for us to participate in. So I actually learned Kathak, which was always a dream of mine.
Wow.
So my guru gave me ghungroos to have, and I still have them in my room. And
Oh, nice.
sometimes I do some riyaz if I have time, but
Mhm.
it's it's not as good as I used to be. But
All
that
right.
was like one of my favorite moments, was doing Kathak. I even
Mhm.
composed a song in Urdu, which was
Wow.
great. Yes, oh my God, it was fantastic. So I worked with an ustad, and we did vocal riyaz, and he helped me come up with the tune, and because I had written the lyrics, and so that was amazing. And we had a language partner, and I loved exploring Bulbulaya.
If you can really enjoy Lucknow if you have all the interests you have, like
Yes,
Kathak, Urdu, clothes, and Mughal, like Mughal Azam. I love that film.
I love
All the
that
and
film.
then and also food like kebabs and biryani.
Yes.
That's how the best way to take
Oh,
Lucknow
I
in.
miss I miss Nihari every day.
Nihari, oh my goodness,
Oh
make
my
me
God,
hungry.
that I had it, and I was just addicted, and I don't think I will ever have Nihari as good as what I had in Lucknow.
Although I've had some good-hearted arguments with folks from Hyderabad about whose biryani is better.
Yeah, side with my people, because I just think Hyderabadi biryani is the best thing since sliced bread. I will die for Hyderabadi biryani.
Right, right,
Lucknowi biryani is pretty close, I have to say. It
right.
it is
Okay,
it is really
all
good.
right.
Can't deny.
Okay, yeah. At least you can say that because you've tasted both.
Yes, exactly,
Right.
exactly. I found Lucknowi biryani a little bit sweeter than the
Okay. Right. Right.
Hyderabadi
Okay.
biryani.
I find Hyderabad by the biryani to be a little bit has a more of a spice kick in it.
Oh,
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. I,
100%.
I never have to like put yogurt in my Lucknowi biryani, but I have to do that in a Hyderabadi biryani.
I have to have yogurt. I have to have lassi. I'm like, it's so spicy.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Zubair, for talking to me, and I really enjoyed, talking about Lucknow and all the things you're interested in, I'm interested in, and thank you for your time.
Perfect. Thank you so much for your questions.
Thank
This
you.
was a
Yeah.
lovely conversation. I'm
Thank you.
so flattered that you wanted to talk to me, and thank you so much, Deepak.
Thank you. Thank you. Don't go yet, okay?
Yep.